We can start the recordings. PC recordings underway.
Backup is rolling.
Recording to the cloud, all set.
Sergeant Polite.
Thank you. Good morning and welcome to the remote hearing on the Committee on Higher Education. For council members and staff, please turn on their video at this time. Thank you. To minimize disruptions, please place all cell phones and electronics to vibrate. You may send your testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that's testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Barron, we are ready to begin.
Good morning, and thank you for joining the Committee on Higher Education for this very important oversight hearing on mental health resources for students at CUNY. I'm Councilmember Inez Barron, and I am the chair of the Committee on Higher Education and a proud CUNY alum. During today's hearing, which will be an update on the committee's October 2020 hearing, we will examine a long-standing issue that has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but remains critical to the success and well-being of the entire CUNY community: access to mental health resources. The college experience is a uniquely challenging period of transition as students adapt to new academic, financial, and social expectations. Additionally, many college-age individuals are in a critical age of development known as emerging adulthood, which is characterized by complex physical and social and psychosocial transitions. It is during this vulnerable period between the ages of 18 to 25 where many mental health disorders may emerge. With the exception of dementia, emerging adults experience more of every diagnosed mental health disorder than any other group. Prior to the pandemic, a 2018 Healthy CUNY survey found 1 in 6 CUNY undergrads experienced depression and moderate to severe psychological distress. 1 in 5 reported experiencing anxiety disorders, and most worryingly, 75% of students who reported symptoms of depression, anxiety, or psychological distress had not seen a mental health professional in the previous year. Now, while we have been all deeply affected by the immense suffering, loss, and social upheaval caused by the pandemic, young adults in particular have been disproportionately impacted. In a recent CDC survey, 63% of young adults reported experiencing anxiety and depression, a rate second only to that of essential workers and unpaid caregivers. Moreover, this is only compounded by the continued racism, continued white privilege, and continued oppression that exists in our everyday lives. We owe it to CUNY students, most of whom are Black and brown, and a great majority of whom are graduates from public schools, where the city and state failed to meet their mental needs, and now they continue to struggle in college. Most of these students are also low income, and many are first-time generation college students. We know that academic success is closely tied to a student's mental well-being, and these students deserve culturally competent counseling, including academic and career counseling. We are at a turning point, not only in this city, but in the country, and we must meet the moment. At today's hearing, the committee will seek to gain a better understanding of mental health resources offered at CUNY, including issues and ongoing concerns that emerged or were complicated by the pandemic. This includes student experiences, as well as how the university and campuses promote available mental health services to students. The committee will also seek to understand utilization rates, as well as how to better serve students in a post-pandemic world. Finally, the committee is interested in understanding how CUNY ensures its counseling services are culturally responsive to the university's diverse student population. In preparing for this hearing, I would like to thank Mr. Omawale Clay, my Chief of Staff, Ms. Indigo Washington, my Director of Legislation and CUNY Liaison, Chloe Rivera, the committee's Senior Policy Analyst, Amy Briggs, the committee's counsel, Michelle Peregrine, the committee's Financial Analyst, and Frank Perez, the committee's Community Engagement Representative. Lastly, I would like to thank all of the council staff, including especially the sergeants at arms, who are working very hard behind the scenes to make this hearing possible. And before we hear from the administration, I'm trying to pull up my next. I want to read into the record a letter which I received from the Black faculty of CUNY. And if you bear with me, I should be able to get it. I believe this is it. Yes. The Association of Black Faculty and Staff of CUNY consists of a range of faculty and staff across CUNY who work in various disciplines, departments, and programs. This hearing on mental health resources for CUNY students in view of the reopening of campuses, in the midst of a pandemic is very timely. Members of our association reviewed the status of how CUNY students have been affected by the reopening. Although classes began on August 25th, 2021, we found that there were a number of issues which are affecting student enrollment and individual campuses because of the readiness of the reopening of campuses, which has been left up to individual campuses. This has resulted in marked differences across the campuses and an unevenness regarding the implementation of those plans. Research on the dire impact of COVID on the Black and Brown community is well documented. These race-related and economic factors should be taken into account to ensure the success of Black, Latino, and people of color students who often face financial hardship and serious challenges in maintaining social distance in their homes and community, and who have not been adequately supported by CUNY. Regarding instruction modes, in-person instruction varies widely, with 1% in-person instruction in New York City Tech to 28% in-person instruction at Hunter College. Hybrid instruction varies from 6% at Medgar Evers College to 38% at Hunter College. In an online survey of the current climate around COVID and their experiences with remote learning, 124 of 227 SEEK students said they preferred fully online classes. 52 of 227 students stated that they preferred hybrid courses, a mix of online and in-person classes. Only 27 students preferred in-person only. When asked how much they were concerned about the Delta variant, 115 of 227 students said they were very concerned, and 55 of 227 students said that they were somewhat concerned. In-person courses are not only about social distancing in the classroom, but also how students travel to campus. Some students take trains, subways, and buses to get to campus. There are risks of getting COVID-19 and Delta. We are not only students or staff, but also someone's children, partner, parent, sibling, and grandchild and friend. Not all college students live by themselves. Many of us live with parents and grandparents and children who are not vaccinated. Education is super important to everyone, but if I can get to the same knowledge online as going to school, why should I risk my life? The recommendation that instruction modes increase in the spring semester should be revisited. Ventilation. Although campuses were reviewed to ensure that proper ventilation protocols were being used, there are some campuses that still have ventilation problems. For example, at Queens and Hunter College, some windows cannot be opened. All areas that have evidence of ventilation problems should be closed to faculty, staff, and students until there is an independent verification that these areas are properly ventilated. There are no clear contact tracing protocols for students. In one college, after being told that they were exposed to COVID-19, students were asked to sit in the last row. Some colleges are relying on an honor system with respect to student vaccinations. Student comment: I've been exposed to a person who had positive COVID, although he was vaccinated. That had put my entire family on high alert because most of us are vaccinated. My youngest of 13 months isn't. This is making it very stressful for everyone in the household. This can happen inside a campus, even if precautionary actions are being taken into consideration. I suggest going back to fully online classes until everyone of all ages have been vaccinated, or there is no trace of this disease that will be a menace to our homes. Student performance. The rush to return students to campus without protocols that allowed for all students to return without interruption to their instruction will have a disparate impact. We're very concerned about the October 7th deadline for students taking in-person or hybrid classes to be fully vaccinated. It is our understanding that students who fail to meet this deadline will be dropped from classes without refunds. So far, we fear this policy will have a disproportionate adverse effect on Black and Brown students who come from communities with the lowest vaccination and rapid misinformation about the vaccine. They stand the possibility of losing not only this semester, but perhaps a significant interruption in their educational careers. We hope that the administration is sensitive to these concerns and develops strategies to mitigate the impact on these vulnerable populations. Even more troubling, it appears that there is no appeal process for students who do not meet the October 7th deadline. In summary, CUNY must go beyond strong words and move to strong and decisive action to address issues of equality, racial justice, and anti-Blackness. The pandemic has exacerbated these issues. CUNY must delve deeper into the structural, funding policies, and unofficial practices that continue to sustain the inhospitable community that Black, Latino, and people of color students and faculty and staff experience at CUNY. We fear that without serious intervention, these continued actions will lead to a precipitous decline of students of color, faculty, and staff engaged at CUNY. This would be a grave miscarriage of racial justice. Black, Latino, people of color students have been negatively impacted by COVID. There should have been a uniform plan and time frame that accounted for and gave weight to maximum proof of vaccination for returning students and faculty to campus. It appears that the accelerated reopening was driven by budgetary needs rather than the health of the students. We recommend that the Chancellery revisit its reopening plans and consult with medical professionals, faculty, campus advisors, staff, and student leaders so that the views of all stakeholders are given full consideration. Given the health and safety concerns, we must act as one university and not 25 separate campuses. Respectfully, the CUNY Association of Black Faculty and Staff. And I think that that letter will help to guide many of the questions and discussion that we are going to engage in today's hearing. And with that, I will now turn it back to Amy, our counsel, so that she can direct us further.
Thank you, Chair Barron. My name is Amy Briggs. I serve as counsel to the Committee on Higher Education at the New York City Council. I will be moderating today's hearing and calling panelists to testify. Before we begin, please remember that everyone will be on mute until I call on you to testify. After you're called on, you will be unmuted by a member of our staff. Note that there will be a few seconds delay before you are unmuted and we can hear you. For public testimony, I will call up individuals in panels. Please listen for your name and I will periodically announce the next few panelists. Once I call your name, a member of our staff will unmute you. The Sergeant at Arms will set a clock and give you the go-ahead to begin your testimony. All public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. After I call your name, please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. For today's hearing, the first panel will include representatives from CUNY, followed by council member questions, then public testimony. For CUNY, we will have Dr. Denise Maybach, Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management, and Ryan Kamir, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, University Director for Mental Health and Wellness, who will be answering questions. I will now administer the oath to the administration. When you hear your name, please respond once a member of our staff unmutes you. Dr. Maybach and Director Kamir, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions? Vice Chancellor Maybach?
I do.
Thank you. Director Kamir?
I do.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor Maybach, you may now begin your testimony.
Thank you. I'm hoping you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you. So good morning, Chairperson Barron and members of the Committee on Higher Education. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony before you as we offer an update on mental health services for the City University of New York and its students. Excuse me. My name is Denise Maybach, and I am honored to serve as the Interim Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management for CUNY. I began my tenure at the City University of New York with the opportunity to come before you on October 14th, 2020, yes, as you and the Committee on Mental Health, Disabilities, and Addiction received testimony on mental health services at CUNY. I must admit, I was excited about the opportunity to come downtown and to be in the same space with all of you and to finally meet you in person. And the rug was pulled out from under me. It is my hope we will get to that day when I will be able to meet you in person rather than to continue in the Brady Bunch space we are in today. From the experience I had last year, I know you are keenly aware of the need for mental health services among college students, and we just heard Chairperson Barron talk more about that in her introductory comments. But the fact is, college students of all ages, from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, at all socioeconomic levels, and participating in all levels of study, experience challenges that are associated with mental health and the need for support. You are also clearly aware of the impact this pandemic has had on the socio-emotional well-being and mental health of our students. As you know, today I am accompanied by Ryan Kamir, who serves as the University Director of Mental Health and Wellness. He is also prepared to offer perspective on university-wide mental health services and data. My focus today is on providing you with updates on mental health needs, resources, and services across CUNY since we last came together for this purpose. So I will not repeat previous testimony as I know you have the written version from last year, but I may reference some of the previous information for purposes of context. So I want to respond to just a couple of the things that Chairperson Barron shared from the letter before I jump into my prepared testimony, because I think it relevant. As you know, we came before the committee, I think it was last month even, to share information about reopening plans. And so as I listened to the overtures and the passion from the Black faculty and staff of the university, I certainly understand the concerns that they are expressing. Some of those issues, I believe we will need to provide the committee with more information on as we go forward. So a copy of the communication, or at least bullet points from that communication, would be very useful, because I don't want to leave it unaddressed. The things they raise in terms of concern about their own health and well-being, and the space that we are asking people to provide instruction in matters. It is not something that we are ignoring or that we are casting a blind eye on. It's important that we pay attention to ventilation, to space, to distancing, and to all of those things. I was trying to keep up and take notes and make sure that I could hit some of these points. So please forgive me if I don't get to everything that was really significant, but I definitely want to be certain that I, along with the team of folks from the City University of New York who are here today and listening today, that we do get back to you in response to those things. I want to make sure that I talk a little bit about where we are with the October 7th deadline, that deadline was established in the context of the policy for student vaccination. So it was set as a 45-day date from the time that the vaccination was approved by the FDA. So that is how that date comes into being. And we can go into more depth about how we're going to manage that. But yes, campuses will be in a position to think about what is happening with individual students and to be able to respond to that as well. So I did want to make sure I hit those things, and to let you know that we are not insensitive to what all of this means, because each of us is impacted by what is happening with the Delta variant. Each of us is impacted by the interaction with people we don't know the status of. We don't know if people are vaccinated. We don't know what jeopardy we may put ourselves in. And I understand the commute. Now that I'm doing it in New York, I totally get it. When you're sitting on a train, whether a commuter train or the subway, and you're near people, you start to wonder. You really start to wonder. And I know that if I get a tickle in my throat, I'm afraid to cough, because I don't want anybody to think that anything is going on with me in that moment. So I totally understand that I'm not insensitive. I may be making light right now, but I truly do understand the impact of all of that and what we are concerned about taking home to older members of our family, to younger members of our family, and the possible impact. So I did not want to go past that without some recognition and the commitment to getting back to you on the points that were made. And we will gladly receive that more specifically. So I am going to go back to the prepared testimony and offer some things about what we heard last time when we were present here, because I think that that is important. I, as a newbie to the CUNY experience, listened to students testify last year and learned of their pain and concern firsthand. I heard experience that left me concerned about our ability to meet the needs of students stressed by life circumstances, compounded by the unprecedented factors of the pandemic. I had to accept mental health issues and services as a critical area on which I need to focus effort and attention. Through the voice of Giovanni, she let us know the significant impact being inflicted by the pandemic on students in the presence of limited resources across the university. Amber emphasized the urgent need for mental health services and her personal experience with long wait times and time-limited service. Neha drew attention to the lack of awareness of services, insufficient services, and the need for better marketing, communication, and coordination to increase access for students. Anna confronted us with the reality of seeking continuity of care and services to manage anxiety as she transferred to CUNY, and the difficulty she experienced in connecting with services despite having insurance, which so many think is the answer to it all. The top 3 presenting problems identified by students through CUNY counseling services and through the technology-based support services were and continue to be anxiety, depression, and academics, and likely how all of those things come together as well. Counseling center directors advocate the need for additional practitioners to meet the burgeoning demand for services. Students come to the place they know to find help with the elusive and unknown experiences of remote learning challenges, displacement, loss of friends and family, general anxiety, and intensified mental health and emotional distress. Already stressed counseling centers and practitioners were and are being challenged to respond to an increased demand for services. I will tell you that the individuals who serve our students through our counseling centers are amazingly committed to what they do far and beyond the things that we might just think in the ordinary course of the responsibility. They are concerned, committed, and making every effort to go above and beyond to be certain they are providing the needed support to our students, whether that be an individual, in group, or through other tools that we have at our disposal. What did we do based on what we heard? So I will start by saying to Giovanni, Amber, Neha, and Anna, along with the others who testified last year, we heard you, and your voices continue to resound in my ears, certainly. I had the privilege of getting acquainted with those representatives from Young Invincibles, and we still meet with them and hear the things that they know from the experiences of working with students from CUNY. I think about the young woman who last year couldn't testify because it just became overwhelming for her. And I reached out to her as well last year. And so it is a matter of recognizing just what is real in this space that is just clouded by COVID, but also is real for our students without any additional pressure. They have the pressure of being a student while also managing all of the other roles in their lives. And we need to be ready and responsive to support them and to be certain they can accomplish the ends for which they've come. So as you may recall, $5 million of the funds received by the university through the Federal CARES Act was allocated to expand mental health related tools and services. Funds were distributed to campuses, and a portion of the funds was designated centrally to support the procurement of university-wide tools. We had the opportunity to procure tools and resources to support access to quality mental health services, addressing the needs we know are paramount for our population of students and the practitioners serving them. Crisis text line has been operational for 6 months, and over 600 students have utilized the crisis texting service to discuss issues such as academics, anxiety, and depression, the top 3 presenting concerns. Crisis text line is free, available 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it is support through trained counselors for those in crisis and is accessible from anywhere in the United States. Over 200 faculty and staff have completed training with Cognito software to respond to students with mental health needs and to provide appropriate resources. This suite of real-time simulations products helps to educate faculty and staff about mental health and suicide prevention, which supports improved academic performance, student retention, and campus safety. Nearly 5,000 international and out-of-state students have access to Talkspace, with enrolled users reporting anxiety and depression as the 2 top issues of concern. Talkspace is the most convenient and affordable way to connect with a licensed therapist, all from the privacy of one's own personal device. Students can send their therapist a text, audio, picture, or video message at any time, and they will respond daily 5 days a week. Talkspace will remain available at least through the next 2 semesters to supplement services for students using the virtual learning environment or preferring this option. Over 20% of the faculty and staff across the university have completed the Grief and Bereavement and Self-Care and Resilience Blackboard courses offered since fall 2020. These courses were offered to support employees in their own care and to aid them in better understanding the experiences being shared during the pandemic. The 10-minute mindfulness course has 34,972 registered CUNY users, with over 80% of the users being students, using the course more than 3 times weekly. This online guided mindfulness meditation program, focusing on reducing stress and anxiety via 10-minute daily mindfulness exercise, is available to all students, faculty, and staff for daily mindfulness meditation practices. Sometimes you just need to pull away and have some time to ground yourself in the midst of all that's going on around you. Telecounseling has been successful at CUNY, with usage numbers and requests for services remaining steady throughout the 2021 academic year. While adherence with counseling services has risen dramatically, specific figures for the academic year are still being tabulated, and results will be provided to the council when calculations are complete. Marketing and communication was raised as a concern last year, and it has increased with the support of the central office communications team. This includes a revamped website, a larger social media presence, communications sent directly to students regarding mental health support, and press briefings on major initiatives. We have monitored a number of marketing and communication metrics following the feedback during the last hearing. Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, CUNY social media accounts have posted about mental health more than 200 times, reaching more than 700,000 unique users. In that time span, we have posted about mental health on Twitter 94 times, yielding 459,288 impressions and 7,290 engagements. On Facebook, we have posted about mental health 49 times, reaching 114,194 users and yielding 122,810 impressions and 2,964 engagements. On Instagram, we have posted about mental health 57 times, reaching 138,099 users and yielding 51,955 impressions. Now, I did not check to see how this stacks up against some of the more popular things that are going on out there in terms of all of these spaces, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth, but I know it's better than it was last year for us. So I'm hoping that we can keep up with Beyonce and Jay-Z and whatever's happening in Drake's life at any given moment, but we are doing better in making sure that students know what is happening at CUNY in these spaces. To announce the new crisis text line service, a press release was published that received 9,945 page views and 4,501 unique visitors. We also created a social media toolkit with various graphics and language shared by social media channels across CUNY's 25 colleges. Our CUNY Brief newsletter from February 2021 announced the crisis text line service and other mental health resources, and was opened by 79,425 members of the CUNY community, including 69,253 students. Since the summer, we have added a mental health resources footer to each CUNY Brief newsletter, helping students access our resource hub quickly and easily. Our mental health resource hub webpage received 45,639 page views and 30,125 unique visitors. Our CUNY Student Continuity page, now known as the CUNY Student Survival Guide, was launched in April 2020 to host an abundance of mental health tips and resources, and has since received 59,419 page views and 50,615 unique visitors. Those are all numbers. There are faces and people behind those numbers. And that is what matters most. We need to know that the information is landing. We need to know that students are getting what they need from all of these opens, these likes, these impressions and connections. That is what matters most. And so we need to be about the business of figuring out impact as well. When I came before you last year, the full-time equivalent count of mental health practitioners available across the Unity was at 108. As we begin this academic year, there has been an increase in the FTE number of practitioners providing mental health services across the university. We have more substantially increased the number of clinicians available to CUNY students through the stimulus funding I will talk about in a moment. The counselor to student ratio at CUNY was 1 to 2,550 in the fall of 2019. That same ratio improved in fall 2020 to 1 to 2,374 students. For spring 2021, the ratio was reduced to 1 clinician for every 2,151 students. Campuses have made the decision to invest in staffing to provide more direct services, resulting in this reduction in the ratio. At the time I finalized my written testimony, I did not have the details I am about to share with you. We want you to know campuses were able to add 54 part-time and 9 full-time clinicians using the CARES Act funding, taking us to a total full-time equivalent of 146 practitioners. This increase in practitioners reduced the clinician to student ratio for the spring semester to 1 clinician for every 1,621 students, bringing us much closer to the IACS standard. And IACS is the International Accreditation of Counseling Services, bringing us closer to their standard of 1 clinician for every 1,500 students. These are temporary lines based on one-time stimulus funds. The need for additional base budget investment is necessary to establish permanent positions beyond the next couple of years. What investments have been made? As Chairperson Barron emphasized during the last related hearing, the commitment of funds to address these issues is critical. The investment in CUNY is necessary in order to assure reasonable levels of service to meet student mental health needs. The federal stimulus dollars provided to colleges and universities have helped us meet some of those needs. CUNY committed the original $5 million from the first allocation of funds under the CARES Act. Comparable amounts have been designated from the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, known as CRESA, and the latest American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, and those funds will be available as well. These resources, along with the $1 million allocation from the state, specifically for mental health services, provide a recent allotment of funds that will total $14,400 to enhance $14,400,000 to enhance mental health services. Yeah, that wasn't impressive at all when I said it the first time, which is supplemented by increased funding and support from the individual colleges as well. These resources certainly make a difference, but additional investment and commitment are required to address the need for more practitioners, reduction in wait time, and enhanced services in response to increased demand due to pandemic-related stressors. The $1 million provided by the state will afford opportunity to establish some permanent positions, but will not get us to those being added through, will not get us to the same level of the number being added through stimulus funds and to the level of FTE necessary to mirror the IACS standard. Additional investment is required. So, all that said, there's still more that needs to be done. You are probably aware of the initiatives to alleviate some of the stressors that exist for CUNY students. I highlight two initiatives in particular: the CUNY Comeback Program, coupled with the release of transcript and diploma holds for those with outstanding debt to the university. The CUNY Comeback Program was launched by Chancellor Matos Rodriguez to relieve the tuition and fee debt of approximately 50,000 CUNY students, using up to $125 million in federal stimulus funds. This debt forgiveness initiative is complemented by a policy change lifting transcript and diploma holds for students with outstanding debt to the university. These initiatives created the opportunity for students to re-enroll starting this semester and to advance their educational and career goals. This semester, we have heard students express an added anxiety of having to socialize in person again. Our marketing and communications team is rolling out a Here For You mental health campaign to showcase the best of CUNY's mental health resources. We will have new graphics of these resources, graphics of 40 new mental health tips, welcoming video messages from Counseling Center staff members, and a revamped mental health webpage. We are also launching CUNY's very first student podcast, with the inaugural episode featuring our own CUNY trustee, Giovanni Piquan, discussing the importance of mental health and her personal experiences. By making CUNY's commitment to students' mental health a clear priority, we hope to support their success during this unprecedented and transitional semester. I mentioned the directors and clinicians, and I again want to emphasize that they are committed to serving our students, and they continue to advocate for resources necessary to make a difference. Who would know better what's needed than those who are confronted with that need? As a counseling psychologist and someone who has worked in campus counseling centers, I know what it means when you know there might be a term limit for services and you are drawing close to the close of that with a client you have worked with for a while, and you know that more may be necessary. But we have to do what is therapeutically appropriate and also allow for as many students to get what they need as possible. So I just herald the work of our counseling center staff, but recognize there is so much more that we need to do to support them and to be certain they are providing the services necessary. Our colleagues at Healthy CUNY survey students regarding their well-being from a variety of perspectives. The data and analyses help us to have a good sense of what is happening in this regard among CUNY students. Recently, these researchers surveyed students regarding their health insurance status and use of health services. Preliminary analysis indicates 10.2% of survey respondents lacked health insurance. Referral for services to address mental health needs of CUNY students will remain a reality. Healthcare insurance is essential for this purpose. This is a reality deserving attention and response in order to assure access to necessary mental health services. According to a preliminary analysis of the recent student parents survey conducted by CUNY, 81% of students utilizing counseling reported it being very helpful, and 96% of students utilizing services reported it being somewhat helpful or very helpful. We are grateful to know this segment of students is highly satisfied with the counseling services they have received, and we recognize the need to extend that experience for other students who do not express this level of satisfaction. I hope, should I have the privilege of coming before you on this topic again, that I will be able to bring you news of greater investment in mental health services, resulting in an even more improved clinician to student ratio, along with data and information about the effective use of resources and services being made available. The City Council has been incredibly supportive of CUNY, and we would certainly welcome additional recurrent City Council funding directly targeted at increasing mental health staffing capacity. I will not blow smoke or pretend we will be able to immediately conquer it all or fully meet the mental health needs of our students. What we will do is to continue to track our improvement in doing so. We will continue to focus on and set proximal goals to that end. We will work to increase mechanisms for accountability and to gather the creative responses of 25 unique colleges and schools, addressing the mental health needs of more than 234,000 students who entrust the partnership in their destiny to those of us at CUNY. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on where we are and to remain accountable to you as city leaders, to the people of the city of New York, whom we all serve, and most importantly, to the students of the City University of New York, who deserve our support, our commitment, and responsiveness to their mental health needs. I conclude with this quote from John Maxwell: "The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails." End quote. We are poised for that sail adjusting with you on behalf of CUNY students as we continue to navigate through this experience that is COVID and seek to offer appropriate support to be certain CUNY students thrive. We're available for your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Before I turn to Chair Barron for questions, I'd like to remind council members to use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that they have a question for this panel. Chair Barron.
Thank you very much, Ms. Briggs. And I want to thank Dr. Maybanks for her testimony and for making that connection to previous attendance at hearings and the topics that we had addressed in that and bringing it forward to this time. I do appreciate that. Before I pose my questions, I do want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Councilmember Ulrich, who's a member of this committee. First, I have about 4 categories of questions. And the first set of questions talks about the COVID virus itself. The safety protocols that are being implemented because of COVID. So it's my understanding that each campus has their own plan. Is that the case?
Yes, campuses were expected to submit plans for approval. And I think our most recent testimony prior to this one was about reopening. And so some of that information was provided during that time. But yes, each campus was expected to submit a plan that was reviewed and had to be approved through central office operations.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you have the information before you, but we would like to know at which phase of resuming in-person instruction is each college campus, and are there any campuses that have fully resumed in-person instruction?
So I don't have the specifics, and we will get that information for you, but in-person instruction is happening on most campuses. I think there might only be one that doesn't have in-person classes at all, but there are in-person classes happening on campuses throughout the system. So we'll get an update for you on where we are in that process.
Thank you. What percentage of CUNY students are fully vaccinated? And can we have that disaggregated by campus?
So we have that information. I have the privilege of managing the responsibility for making sure the uploaded information gets approved in the system. So we're maintaining data on that. And we do know how many students are enrolled in person and in hybrid classes, and therefore must be vaccinated in order to participate in those classes. So we've been most closely monitoring our in-person enrollment information. And before I get off, I can probably pull that up. I just don't want to stop looking at the camera and paying attention to start to stare at the computer to try to find it all. But we do have some of that information and can get that back to you. I will tell you that we also are paying attention to the overall number of students and where they are in their vaccination status as well. So we saw an increase over time, and with the constant overtures to say, you need to be vaccinated, you need to upload your information. We saw a significant increase in the number that were putting that information in who are enrolled in in-person classes. So I know at one point, I don't want to, let me not guess. Let me not throw percentages out there because I'll be guessing, but I will get that information and we'll get it to you.
Thank you. I understand the policy is that all students must be vaccinated and submit documentation by September 27th or face academic consequences. So how many campuses are ensuring in-person instruction is as safe until the 27th?
So
how are campuses ensuring that?
So anyone who has not uploaded information into the system for approval is to be tested. Testing is available, and there are testing sites. I believe there are 20 testing sites, and if Ryan, you know better, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going with that. There are 20 testing sites, and students can use those resources to make sure that they are approved to be on campus physically. I'm trying to remember.
So if you're not vaccinated,
Okay.
they can present documentation
Of
that
testing of a negative test within
negative test.
7 days of the time that they are.
Say again?
The test must be within a 7-day period of the
Within
time.
7 days, okay.
So the expectation is that you're uploading your proof of vaccination, that then goes through a process of approval, and then you are in the system for receiving a pass that gives you access so that there is no question about your status. And as I said, and if you can't, then you test, and that same system will then indicate that you are approved to be on campus. You mentioned the date of the 27th. That date was set based on the 45-day date of October 7th, so that there would be time to approve information that was uploaded. So we're hoping that students have fulfilled the fully vaccinated protocol. In other words, if you have the 2-dose series, that you're 2 weeks beyond your last dose, or that if you're taking the 1-dose protocol with Johnson & Johnson, that you have that 2 weeks beyond the date of that vaccination.
And yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please, it's okay.
Is there a separate office, division, or department that's dedicated to doing that so that we know what the reporting is?
Separate office for the
For
receipt
validating,
of
for the
validating?
information that's being presented by students that they're vaccinated. How we
So the-
making sure that that's being tracked and monitored and not going to fall between the cracks anyplace.
The information is being uploaded into the CUNY First process and system that has been designated in that way. And there are individuals who have been identified as location vaccine authorities. We could just call them LVAs for short. So everything gets an acronym at CUNY. So the LVAs are responsible for going in and reviewing what has been uploaded and doing the approval so that it then moves forward so that it becomes a pass for accessing campus. They are also reviewing medical exemptions and religious exceptions that are being submitted.
For those campuses that have different policies, how I would think that that would be a perhaps negative impact if a student wants to take student classes at a visiting campus as a visitor there, and the protocols are different. You know, we talk about pathways and the advantage of pathways, that there would be the seamless movement throughout all 25 campuses. And I'm wondering, how is it now that these 25 campuses in this instance have their own unique protocols and programs, how that's going to impact a student who wants to take or monitor a class, visit a class, take a class as a visiting student at a different campus, which may have very different protocols.
Okay, so that helps me because the policy is the policy. There's one policy, but there may be different processes. One policy, multiple processes and protocols may exist. So the approval and the documentation that is associated with your vaccination status is specific to the student and goes with the student. So whatever the circumstance may be on the next campus, the student is approved, they are vaccinated, we have that information. So it is then just a matter of whatever the processes may be about how you show your pass, but you have a pass at that point because it is student specific. It's tied to the student, not to the campus.
Thank you.
For the very reason that you identified, Chairperson Barron. Yeah, because we have students that are, you know, hopping around for any reason. I may work in the Bronx, and so I want to take classes there and live in Queens. So yeah.
There seems to be, or I've been told that there may be an issue with students who have what's called that breakthrough, even though they're fully vaccinated, they do contract the virus again or test positive for the virus again and may not have any symptoms. If a student tests positive, even though they may have been fully vaccinated, how is that instructor, that staff person, the faculty person going to know, well, wait a minute, this student shouldn't be here, and particularly in light of the HIPAA laws, which provide particularly needed protection to individuals. So does an instructor get a notice? Well, one of your students has tested positive. How does the instructor, I've been told that the instructor has gotten a notice, one of your students has tested positive. Can that be the case? And then if the student is either, oh gosh, I got to get this last class before I stay home, or for whatever reason, not removing themselves, how then is that class population going to be protected?
Chairperson Barron, in all honesty, I don't know that I'm the best person to respond to that with any detail. All I can tell you is that if a person tests positive, they do not have access to campus. That's the best that I can offer at this point, but we will get back to you and let you know if there's any notice that says anything. But, you know, we, as you said, HIPAA and FERPA causes us to have to be careful about what we say and how we communicate that.
Okay. So who's responsible on campus for monitoring that students, faculty, and staff are in fact masked and keeping social distance on campus?
That might differ with each campus protocol. So
okay. each campus should have someone designated for that. Is there a title for that person?
I am not familiar with that. As I said, there may be others who would be better to respond to that. I've not monitored that and didn't check it before coming for this purpose. So I'm not really in the best position.
Okay,
to
so we
respond.
know that when public schools opened last week, there were, I believe, 53 cases or thereabouts, 80 cases of people who tested positive. Looking at the higher education programs, what will it take to trigger a shift from in-person instruction to distance learning? And does that vary from campus to campus?
I think that would be something that would happen primarily from Central setting some standards, but I can't speak to what it would be at this point because I'm not privy to us having had a conversation about that very directly. It may be, and I know that there are things embedded in the individual plans for campuses about what would change in that regard. So again, just not the best person to respond to that.
Okay, so
but given you've posed the question, I'm sure someone will be able to get back to you.
Thank you. So we'll be looking forward to having that answer, because I'm sure that CUNY has been forward thinking to say, well, listen, we've got this program now, we have these hybrid models, but just in case
yes,
there's a surge, we want to know what is that threshold that would trigger that response.
And as I said, I know there are things in the individual plans, but I think there, is probably a statement at the central level as well. I'm just not aware right now.
Okay. We received information about a photo that was shared that showed 900 students in a lecture hall, photo shared by a parent of a Hunter College auditorium packed with students with the comment, approximately 900 students, according to the professor. How is that, if that is the case, why did that happen?
I can't imagine where that happened or how that could have happened, because we are required to keep a reasonable level of distance. And I don't know any spaces that people were being allowed in to that extent. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, again, it was reported to us that that was the case, and we'll share that with you as well, and so that you can pursue it further. I'd like to move on now to general questions and questions about staffing. I was pleased to hear the movement in the ratio that approaches what it is that the standards say should be achieved. Pleased to know that it went from 1 to 2,500, down to 1 to 2,334, 374, down to 1 to 2,161. And I believe the last number you gave me was even lower than that.
Yes, it is below 2,000. So it's 1 to 1,661, I believe is the number.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 1,600. Yeah, that's right. 61, I think is right. Ryan, please jump in here. I'm not looking at my notes right now. I'm looking at the screen. Are you allowed to unmute or no?
I'll ask
1,621.
21. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How were you able to achieve that in such a short period of time? I think that's commendable, I have to say that. And how were you able to achieve that?
So we added 54 part-time and 9 full-time clinicians. And so when we were able to do that using the stimulus funds that were made available, because I think to a person, and I'm going to give you, Ryan, a chance to respond to this. I believe to a person, the counseling center directors were saying, we need additional clinicians. That's what we need. It's like, it's nice to have the tele-counseling and all of those things, but we need additional clinicians. So given the opportunity to do so, they employed on a temporary basis clinicians. Ryan, you want to?
Yes, just before I delve into that, just want to thank Chair Barron and the committee for having us both here again. Yes, we understood that the CARES stimulus funding would come with some direction to invest in mental health based on many things we've been hearing and based on our appearance before the council last year and discussions with various stakeholders across the university, that it was important to have additional funding for mental health and specifically for staffing. So when the stimulus funding was made available to campuses, they jumped at the chance to be able to hire part-time clinicians and really saw the benefits of adding additional staff to their roles in order to continue to provide services at a higher level for CUNY students.
Thank you. So you said that the funds were able to have additional hiring of 54 part-time and 9 full-time. So what now are the total numbers? These
Total-
54 are additional workers?
The total full-time equivalent clinicians available is 146.
And part-time?
That's everybody. So that accounts
Everybody
for how
together.
much time is
How much time to give? So can you break that out? Can you disaggregate that so that we'll know how many are part-time and how many are full-time?
overall. You mean the total 146? How many are part-time and full-time?
Yes.
Is that okay? So yes, we should be able to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We can break that out for you.
Thank you. I do want to acknowledge we've been joined by Councilmember Majority Leader Lori Cumbo, who is a member of this committee. Thank you. How are students, how do we determine the number of hours a student may need in terms of interacting, and whether it should be in person or whether it can be telecounseling? How do we determine that?
I can tell you some of that is determined by the presenting problem. That, therapeutically, what seems appropriate. There are standards that have been set for years and in the counseling psychology context and in college counseling context that look at what it is that seems reasonable in terms of offering support to students, and students sometimes being able to get a series of sessions and then leave and come back, and that being therapeutic in the process. But I'm going to leave Ryan to talk more specifically about CUNY and how we make that decision here.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chancellor Maybank. I think we've been doing a lot of learning, of course, over the course of the last 18 months through the pandemic, and with the ability to offer services as telecounseling and ability to offer sort of unique technological advances to supporting mental health. We've learned that students respond very differently to the available needs, and some students respond better to telecounseling, and some students just want someone that they can send a text to, in a time of crisis, and others want to sit in an office with a clinical staff member. So I think the important thing that we've learned and what we've tried to do during the course of the last 18 months is start where the student is. And after, of course, a psychological assessment to determine the needs, as Dr. Maybank indicated, how would the student feel most comfortable proceeding? And we think it's important for the students' needs to be met so that they can chart the course of their own services. And it's something that we will continue to do as we continue with the new normal, as much as I hate that phrase, but we definitely would like to see a continued footprint of some of the things that worked really well, including telecounseling going forward.
Thank you. As you send the information about how many of the counselors are full-time and part-time, we would also like to have that information disaggregated by campus, if you would. Well, what is the impact? Are you also using interns as a part of the counseling services that you provide to your students? or are they only seen by clinicians who have already completed their training?
No, we definitely use interns, and I'm going to be quiet and let Ryan talk about that, but I just wanted to talk broadly about the importance of that. I remember doing my own internship in a counseling center, and the significant experience that is, and the opportunity to be supervised by those who are doing this work on a regular basis makes such a difference in your perspective about the importance of working in a counseling center and providing services to students. So Ryan?
Yes, and I will echo that to say that as a clinician myself who also went through training in clinical settings, it is very important to be in a position to train and then to be trained and then to train as a clinician, because it really creates a circular path in terms of the work that we do. Yes, we do use interns from various disciplines within our counseling centers, large amounts of psychologists, but also social workers, mental health counselors, and various iterations to be able to do training within the counseling centers, and also to receive supervision that aligns with the exemplary work that is done in our counseling centers. We've also been very mindful of where the clinicians in training are coming from, and trying to make sure that we give our CUNY students an opportunity to be able to serve in a capacity with experiential learning, to be able to provide them with these experiences. And of course, we have students from all over the city to be able to do these internships, but we also want to make sure that CUNY students are receiving services from both ends.
With the funding that you have received that allows you to hire additional staff, how long will that funding remain in place so that these persons can remain on staff?
So we can talk about two different sets of money. So the money that came from the state, the $1 million, I believe that is a permanent provision. So that gives us the opportunity to hire permanent staff. And I'm certain that the campuses will use those resources to do just that. I doubt that money will be used to supplement tele services or anything like that. The money that is coming from the stimulus funds is money that is time limited. And I know that the CARES Act money was extended to next year, to 2022. And then we have a new infusion of money through the CRESA and the ARPA money as well. And so we're doing comparable amounts of money there. So I would say we can probably be 3 years out from this year with those resources. But beyond that, we're going to need some additional resources or ways to make certain that the positions can be made permanent and made available and make people available to see our students, whether it be in groups, in individual, or in other types of services, psychoeducational services and so forth.
Thank you. And as you give the information about the breakdown of part-time and full-time and disaggregated by campus, if you would also give us current full-time mental health counselor to student ratio at each campus, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, in your testimony, you mentioned several programs that are available for students. I think you said the crisis text line.
Yes.
You said talk space. Talked about a mindfulness programming and telecounseling. And you gave us numbers as to how students are utilizing or at least interacting with these platforms, with these programs. How are we going to get the word out to every CUNY student that these programs exist?
And so we also have bolstered our communications and marketing efforts in an effort to do that. And that's why I say, you know, I'm not sure what the best trending is for, you know, when you really have made it, on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever it is. I just know we are better than we were, but we still have more that we can do, certainly. So we have the addition of the website and the addition of the briefs that go out with the extra tickler at the bottom. And so we're hopeful that we'll be able to push information about these resources and services on a regular basis, on some scheduled basis, so that students will see it. It's a matter of keeping it in front of folks and making sure that faculty know about what resources are out there so that they can announce it, and being certain that other students are sharing it as well. That word of mouth, that peer-to-peer experience is often the best way to get students to use the resources that are available. Ryan, you want to add to that?
Yes, and I think the communications plan also is, and the work that the funding that we've spent on technology is a multi-pronged approach, because we think it's important not only to speak directly to students, but also to make sure faculty are aware of these resources so they can communicate them. So staff members, even those who are outside of a mental health role, will know about the resources. So if they are able to communicate with a student, they should feel comfortable to do so. So we find that we feel that it's important, to expand the communication, not just directly to students who are very busy in their schoolwork, et cetera, but also to make sure that everyone in the community, as a CUNY community, is aware of whatever resources are available.
And thank you. In particularly talking about staff, Dr. Maybank, in your testimony, I believe you said that there was an opportunity for staff and faculty to be trained in some types of procedures that they can use, share or use with their students. I didn't have a chance to write down what that program is.
Cognito is the tool, and it's a simulation-based interaction, so that you get to know how to approach a student with information and to provide them with resources, what things might be said and how you can respond. Because more often than not, we are afraid to say the wrong thing, so we say nothing. And we want to arm our faculty and staff we want to empower them by helping them know it's better to step in and to offer assistance. When someone is suicidal, what can you say? What do you do? Where do you direct them? And how do you make that meaningful in that experience without feeling like, I shouldn't go there. That's not my stuff. I don't know what to do with that, so I'm just going to walk away. No, you need to engage, because people are looking for support. Often it's a cry for help in some way that you even were aware. They were reaching out in some way. And so how do we empower faculty and staff to then be able to do that? And so that's one of the tools that's helping get people ready for that in a way that we're not asking you to go now and be trained as a counselor. We're just trying to give you the tools that will allow you to have the interaction.
Yes. The next question in this area is, can you describe why counselors were once on a faculty line and are now on the administrative line, and how has this impacted their responsibilities and ability to serve students? And what is that number that we're looking at?
I'm going to defer to Ryan on that switch because I am unfamiliar, but being on a faculty line versus being on an administrative line shouldn't change the way the service is being provided, but I'm going to let Ryan respond.
Sure. And it's a great question, and one that predates my time at CUNY by quite some time, but I will take a stab at it. Is my understanding is that the role of college counseling as it evolved over the years, and it was felt that the positions of college counselor should be an administrative role rather than in a faculty role. There are still faculty counselors that exist at CUNY, and I could not tell you off the top of my head how many, unfortunately. But it is my understanding that the shift in college counseling to a more public health model rather than an advisement model that occurred in higher education over the years is the reason for that switch. I would have to get some detail from my predecessors at CUNY to be able to provide more details, however.
So would you say
that is a national thing, Chairperson Barron. That's not just something happening here. So that as people are retiring or leaving roles, they're not being replaced with faculty lines. They're taking these other administrative titles or classifications.
You alluded to the fact that even though the lines that they're on may be different, they're still offering the same type and level of services?
Yeah, because we're still hiring people with doctoral degrees in counseling, with licensed social workers. Ryan, you'd be better to kind of talk about who it is we
yes, we're still hiring those who are, have degrees in psychology and social work and other mental health disciplines, licensed professional counselors, to be able to provide mental health specific work. So the lines are not disappearing themselves; they're just simply being transferred from a faculty position who may have a dual role of providing, education and courses and advisement to someone who's specifically designated to do the mental health treatment services for the university.
Would there be any distinction in their title or in their ability to have the opportunity to move up? Let's say in a department, if they were in a department, they were assigned to a department, there'd be that opportunity, I think, to move in that department. Is that the same with administrative line?
I think it's different. There's a different kind of tenuring because faculty get tenure, and that's a different process. But you have the other issues that are associated with a faculty line as well, whereas we don't have access to them over the summer. But when you have that administrative line, you have that longer period in the year as well. And there are other ways of establishing longevity in that classification system.
And would the salaries be the same?
I don't know the answer to that.
I will say that the salaries are analogous to between the faculty lines and the higher education associate, the higher education officer lines. That's obviously a union question for the PSC to discuss. But the salary lines are identical between the faculty progression and the higher education officer progression when it comes to the counseling, those that are appointed in counseling, yes.
Thank you. I'm going to try to move briefly through the rest of my questions, or rather I should say quickly through the rest of my questions so that my colleagues can have an opportunity to pose questions also. Moving on to the mental health access for students. What are the different ways that students can access campus and campus mental health resources? And can you provide data on students who are utilizing teleconferencing services versus in-person counseling?
Ryan, I'm going to be quiet.
I think the major inroad, well, it's changed a little bit, of course, over the past 18 months, obviously. So we've relied more on electronic technology to be able to have folks emailing in and connecting into a Zoom meeting. As we're working on this transition back to on campus, the importance of word of mouth and faculty and staff referrals and peer information becomes more important. So we're in something of a transitional time right now, but I can certainly look at the data from last year and get back to you with the details of what the footprint looks like.
And so are there any limits on how students may access mental health resources. For example, is there a maximum number of sessions that a student may have with a counselor? Is that set from the beginning so that going in, okay, each student is allowed 3 sessions, 4, 8. Is that a set number?
The last time we collected this data was pre-pandemic to discuss session limits. And I think we're in a different place right now to be able to look at that figures. And I can certainly collect some data and get it back to you. Typically, the way it works is depending on the volume of students and the clinicians available, there is a set limit that is sort of set at the beginning of each student's time with the counseling center. Since we've had such an increase with the part-time hires that we've mentioned before, and since we've been virtual, those numbers may be sort of quite distorted from where they had been. But I will collect some information from the counseling centers and I can get back to you on that, certainly.
Thank you. Are students allowed to access different resources? For example, can they use both telecounseling and in-person counseling, or are they restricted to one form once they are in this counseling?
They are not restricted per se. We'd like to encourage our students to use whatever resources are available to them. If someone is working with a counselor in the counseling center, however, we would prefer them not to have another counselor through a different service that they would use, just to make sure that we're providing the best care available. But there's no restrictions on anything that we're offering in terms of services. And it's a question that does come up from students from time to time, and our counselors are happy to discuss what they think is the best option.
And so what do students do when they have exhausted all campus resources?
When they've exhausted all their campus resources, they can work along with their counselor and other case managers that may be of employ in the counseling centers to help them transition to an outside source of mental health support. This is also important, obviously, for folks that are in need of a higher level of support than we can provide. And so we do have staff that are able to help them with that transition. We will certainly not turn anyone away. And if someone comes back and says that didn't work for me, we will continue to work for them until a plan comes together.
So does CUNY track those students and consider their needs and try to make sure that once they've exhausted what CUNY has to offer, that there's still ongoing outreach? Do you track those students, or do you just send them to a person and hope that they follow through?
I believe, again, this is a question that I'd have to get some more details on from the counseling centers, but I do believe that they are tracked in terms of, this is the plan that we've set with the student, and we'll follow up to make sure that that happens.
Okay, and then
I believe it was Amber. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Yes, continue.
Chairperson. I believe that it was Amber last year that talked about that. It was either Amber or Anna that talked about that last year and talked about the fact that they felt like there should have been a little more connectedness.
Right.
And so it is something on my radar, and we can definitely take a look at that. And if it's inadequate, certainly figure out how we might put plans in place for a better tracking and communication. It's about how we communicate with students, really, in that regard. Because when you make a referral, you don't want them to feel like you're just pushing them off or passing them on, but that you're still there with them. They're still our students. So.
Thank you. And how many referrals do counselors make, and to whom? And do you find that there's a particular type of issue that gets more of a referral than others?
I would not say that there's an issue per se that would get a referral to others. I think it has to do with the level of treatment that the student needs and is able to provide. I will just give one example for medication management. Most of our campuses do not have a psychiatrist on staff. So that is something that we would need to connect a student with an outside clinician for. But it would not necessarily be issue-based, but more of level of service-based.
Do counselors have an opportunity to, in a structured way, meet with other counselors to share information or to discuss protocols or any other pertinent issues?
Yes, we have a twice monthly counseling center directors meeting, which takes place now virtually, but will resume in person soon, hopefully. And basically, it's a meeting with all of the directors plus myself and guests as needed. Dr. Maybank has come to that meeting as well. And it's a time for us to discuss protocols and communicate between campuses, but also from central to campuses and vice versa. So we have that a regular arrangement.
Can sessions be extended to include other family members?
Yes, absolutely. We offer services that incorporate family, couples counseling as needed. Obviously, the family unit and a person's community and social ties are important to their mental health. So we do offer those as appropriate.
The other thing I wanted to add is that just as a matter of practice in counseling psychology and counseling centers, there's a matter of case management. And so often there is consultation with colleagues around, it's like, I'm kind of stuck. I've been seeing this person and I really would like some help with this. And so there are ways to engage to the benefit of your student, client, and to be able to share information and to learn from one another also in that process, which can be really useful.
Absolutely.
How long is the waiting list, or how much time does it take for a person to get services, either in person or virtual? And can we find out what that is by each campus?
I can certainly find that out for you. Again, we've been the numbers are a bit askew because we've been online and we've been trying to offer with the virtual service, obviously a much more rapid response because we're capable of doing it when we're, and enhancing evening services and weekends, et cetera. So we'll get numbers back to you on that. I can tell you that traditionally the counseling directors like to keep it very low. But again, we can get numbers back to that.
And very important for me, how are we addressing the significance and importance of having counselors that are culturally reflective of the students that we're serving and culturally and trained in cultural sensitivity for the students that we're dealing with? What are the number of counselors that are Black that are on our campuses? What are the number that are Latino? Because those are the major groups that we have at CUNY. So what are those numbers? And if they're not of those ethnic groups, what kind of sensitivity training? And I know they're counselors and they're professionals, but what kind of sensitivity training do they receive?
Sure, we will certainly get back to you with numbers. We had provided some numbers last time around, but obviously since we've done hires, we want to update those for you. So we're certain to do that. And I will say, in terms of ongoing training and professional development, it's a big piece of what we do in the counseling centers themselves, but also from central office. And a lot of the work that I try to do involves around professional development around many issues. We've recently had several campuses train in anti-Black racism and supervision and how to deal with those issues in treatment and in supervision. So that's a regular clinical matter as well as a training matter, just as one example. So there are many more, and I would be happy to provide you with more detailed responses about the professional development that we do.
Great. How has CUNY made efforts to reach immigrant and first-generation college students who may not be aware of mental health services available on their campus? Is there a particular segment that we need to carve out for them to make sure that they know, because it may not be a part of their culture to even acknowledge that there are these kinds of issues?
Sure. That's always been, I'm sorry. please.
Oh, you go ahead. You go ahead, Ryan.
No, and the question has come up before, and it's something that we're definitely looking at in terms of improving and working on, because it is very difficult. And we've offered, we've offered a particular service this time around for international and out of state students for the pandemic. But I think we need to be as clear with our communications as we're being to in other areas to target those specific groups. And so I will defer to Dr. Maybank for more comment on that.
I believe that, with making sure that we had talks an option for our students who were in other countries or in other states. That was one way that we were engaging them. But I agree that, we have to make certain students understand that this is a service that is a part of the experience for them as a student at CUNY, and make certain that they know how to access that information, those services and resources, because it is important. And people who are having that cross-cultural experience as an international student coming into this space may have particular stressors with which they would need support as well. So it is of concern and something to which we are paying attention.
And can you confirm that each individual college has updated their website to reflect all mental health services available to students this semester?
Can't tell you that today, but we certainly can check.
Great, thank you. And then just shifting a few questions for faculty regarding faculty and staff. In addition to CUNY's Employment Assistance Program, EAP, do CUNY employees have access to mental health resources through the university?
Outside of the Employee Assistance Program, they don't have any university provided mental health benefits. However, I understand the EAP benefits that are on offer are quite good. I would defer to my human resources colleagues in that area. We do attempt and as Dr. Maybank spoke about before, we offered some Blackboard courses on self-care and bereavement and grief. And while those courses were a sort of dual role for helping to help students as well, we understood that some folks may be using them for information for themselves as well. So I would defer to human resources for the actual offerings.
And the next question in this category is, do colleges provide faculty and staff with information on identifying students that may need a referral for mental health counseling? And I imagine that's a part of Cognito that you mentioned. I would imagine that that's a part of that. But
you're a quick study, Chairperson Barron, you're a quick study, you got that one. So yeah, so that is designed for that purpose, but there are other ways as well that, because there's something called, oh goodness, I just blocked that fast, Ryan. First aid, is it mental health? Goodness.
Mental health first aid, yes.
Mental health first aid, thank you. And then QPR is another program. So there are different things that some of my colleagues who are in counseling psychology, they would know about and be able to offer in their campus setting. But we wanted to make sure that Cognito was available across the board. And that's why that one was purchased centrally. But there are a number of different tools that help those who are not in the field of counseling and psychology and psychiatry to get the tools to be able to have that conversation and to know when to say what and what to do to get students connected with resources.
Thank you. So you've talked about the $5 million allocated through CARES, and you've talked about CUNY having an additional 1.9 million added since adoption. In addition, CUNY's budget includes $77.1 million for FY23 to be allocated at the discretion of the community colleges. How has each campus spent their allocation for FY21?
We would definitely have to get back to you on that, because that would be something we would have to gather from each of them.
Right. And
as Ryan worked diligently to get that number of 54 and 9 for us.
yes,
You know, it takes a little doing just to make
That's
certain
fine.
that we're getting it directly. So we
Okay.
can get that.
to date, and this may also be a question that you can get back to us on, to date, how much of the federal funding earmarked for mental health has been allocated to each of the community colleges? And what was the methodology used for distribution of these funds? Did they decide who made the decision and the board approved it, or was there a mandated distribution inherent from each of the aid packages? Was it based on student population? Was it based on demonstrated need through the past number of students? What was the formula?
We will get that for you. And you said you particularly are interested in that for community college.
Yes. What is the baseline funding comprised of city tax levy for in FY22 for mental health resources for students at the community college? And then what is the total budget? We'll send you these in writing. Then what is the total budget for mental health services, including all revenue streams for FY22? Okay. And there are two others questions, and we'll put them in writing to you. One is the 77 million in federal aid in FY23 for community colleges. What portion of this funding will be allocated toward mental health? And do the community colleges have enough funding to deliver the support necessary to its student population? And if not, what is the deficit? Again, we'll send you these in writing. And I wanted to know what had been individual campuses' efforts and successes in getting additional funding through other sources rather than through the usual pipeline. Have they made those efforts and have they been successful?
Ryan, do you know of any particular circumstances?
There have been some efforts in the past. One that comes to mind immediately is the substance abuse grant from the New York State Office of OASIS. They renamed it, so I have trouble remembering the new name. New York State OASIS. So they have a grant for 5 campuses. More recently, I would have to get back to you on that, but there are opportunities that do present themselves.
Thank you. Well, that concludes the questions that I have. And I do want to thank you for at the outset responding to the fact that we did receive a letter from the CUNY Black faculty and staff, and that you would be interested in getting a copy of that. We'll make sure that we get that to you, and that you've indicated you would love to respond to them and be involved with that. So we do appreciate that. And at this time, I want to thank you for coming, and I will turn it now back to the host, our counsel, Amy Briggs.
Thank you, Chair Barron. Seeing as we have no other council members waiting to ask questions, we can now turn it over to the public testimony portion of this hearing, and we have concluded the administration's testimony.
Thank you to the administration for coming once again.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone that we will call up individuals in panels. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you and you may begin your testimony once the Sergeant at Arms sets the clock and gives you the cue. All testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Remember, there is a few seconds delay when you are unmuted before we can hear you. And please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. The first panel for public speaking will include Remy Salas from the CUNY Rising Alliance, Anna Compton from the New York Public Interest Research Group, and Azania Sammy Maitland. Remy Salas, you may begin your testimony. I will now call on Remy Salas to begin his testimony.
Time begins now.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and the entire Higher Education Committee and Chair Barron. My name is Remy Salas. I am the campaign director for the CUNY Rising Alliance, as well as a professor in the Department of Ethnic and Race Studies at CUNY BMCC, and a proud union member for the PSC CUNY. CUNY is lagging way behind on the recommended ratio of 1 to 1,000 clinical professional counselors per student. This is according to the accreditation of counseling. Right now, CUNY averages 1 mental health counselor to 2,700 students, which is unacceptable. The CUNY 19 pandemic has been devastating for all students trying to cope with its impact, how it impacts their lives while they're still pursuing their education. As a professor, it breaks my heart to see many of my former students, even active students, not have enough support to help them thrive, causing many to struggle academically, even going as far as dropping out. CUNY has so much untapped potential and human capital and great students not to provide the efficient mental health resources. The demand for more clinical professionals arose way before the pandemic. Advisors can be very vital to any student's mental health, where they can speak, clear their minds, and provide students the direction and guidance on how to deal with life's challenges while completing their education. I would also like to add that at least there are more than 50% of CUNY students that live below the poverty line and face housing and food insecurity. Some are even living in shelters as they fight to improve their lives. They fight to improve the lives of their families. It is our responsibility to ensure that students are given all the tools and resources they need to be healthy and successful. Once again, I want to thank everyone at the Higher Education Committee and all the members of the committee, the opportunity to speak today and shed some light on this urgent need for our students, staff, and entire community. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now call on Anna Compton.
Time begins now.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name is Anna Compton, and I'm a senior at Hunter College. This is not my first time testifying on mental health. Although there have been improvements, we need to ensure that resources are not only available, but accessible. Transferring in 2019 was not easy, especially as a student with an IEP from a 2-year SUNY to a 4-year CUNY. It was extremely isolating, and the only reason I learned about services like the counseling center was because I am registered with the accessibility office. I quickly learned that this wouldn't be easy, and on top of this, the intake appointment would take 4 to 6 weeks. I was told by friends of mine to be careful with how much I shared because they are quick to send you to an outside provider. I immediately communicated that I was fine with short-term sessions, but I was still referred off campus. I was given a list of 10 therapists in the city that took my insurance. With this list came many barriers. Many of these providers did not take my insurance, and for those that did, the waiting period for an intake would be about 8 weeks, and sessions were not guaranteed and could take up to 12 weeks. On top of this, many of the providers were an hour away or only had sessions during class times and limited hours, or they never called me back. In March of 2020, I was desperate. Distance learning with a disability was brutal. I just needed someone to listen, even if it was only for a session. I essentially begged Hunter's counseling services to do short-term sessions, but was given the same list of referrals that they gave me in September 2019. It's also important to know that before we even began online learning, I had been in their office 3 times. And one of these visits, my counselor even sat down with me and we called the referrals together. And she was able to see that they weren't working. Once July 2020 rolled around, I got a call back. I began sessions with a therapist, but it was not a positive experience and I had to end it immediately. Fall 2020, I was able to complete a handful of sessions, and then December came around, and as I settled in, I was told that my therapist had been transferred to another facility, and I was able to stay with this place, but I didn't get sessions rolling until around April. And this being our 3rd semester fully online, my mental health was at an all-time low at this point in April. And I'm reminded of this on the daily with my GPA and grades from last semester. We are now in fall 2020 and I'm starting this process all over again. In the last 5 months, I have had 4 sessions. Similar to my summer situation, there's only one open time for her to meet with me. I asked if it was possible to see another therapist in-house, and she told me I would have to be waitlisted for an intake appointment, and it could take up to 6 weeks. I understand therapists cannot be available to us 24/7, but in these cases, I feel campuses need to help students find a solution and meet us halfway. I think there should be counselors available. Oh, sorry. Am I cut off?
You may continue.
Okay. Oh, okay. Can I continue? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think in situations like this, there needs to just be some kind of emergency session available. I'm sorry, I'm almost done. Not only do we need more counselors, but we need more counselors to work with students with disabilities, students who are food or housing insecure, students of color, and LGBTQ students. We needed this before the pandemic, and we certainly need it now. We need direct action from our New York leaders to invest in and prioritize the well-being of public school students. This includes the governor, city council, the board of trustees, and campus presidents. We need to look at how other colleges are addressing mental health and invest in options that work for all CUNY students and ensure that the wellness fees we are paying for are actually being utilized for us and by us. NYPIRG is calling for more funding for on-site mental health services on campus and to decrease wait times like the ones I've experienced. I also ask for the creation of a funded outreach to be created so we can destigmatize mental health and extend these support services to more students so that they can receive the help they need. I believe this can be done with the help and support of the City Council by ensuring adequate funding for mental health services, passing the New Deal for CUNY, and we can bring about structural change for educational experiences of students. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I will now call on Azania Sammy Maitland to testify.
Time begins.
Good almost afternoon. My name is Azania Sammy Maitland, and I'm speaking as a student at Hunter College. Thank you for inviting me to testify. Today, I will be speaking on the importance of mental health support services on campus. We are enduring trying times in which the very fabric of our society and notions of who we are as Americans and residents of New York State have been stretched nearly to the breaking point. So it's no surprise that the psychological resilience of many has been rendered threadbare. College students inhabit a precarious mile marker on the road that is life. It is a journey of judgment, obstacles, and becoming. It is a process of professionalizing personhood to be sorted and siloed into the career in which your actual survival in society is tied to. Even in the most privileged of circumstances, it can trigger an existential crisis. So what is the trajectory for students who are facing poverty, food insecurity, housing insecurity, and the myriad of challenges that working class New Yorkers must overcome every single day to successfully navigate the road of life? As an aside, yet of equal consideration, I implore all decision makers and agenda setters to take into account the need for culturally competent mental health services. There are difficult dialogues to be unpacked within discussions about racism in America. And if the objective is mending and healing in the service of wellness and healthy personhood to best navigate the road of life, then asking Black students to cross racial lines on that journey to inner peace may be quite tumultuous. We must ensure ample access to LCSWs and counselors of color. NYPIRG is calling for more funding for on-site mental health services on campus and to decrease wait times. I am also asking you to consider providing the funding for creating an outreach program so we can take the shame out of needing mental health support and extend these support services to students who may have never reached out for help before. An outreach program could also enable data collection to gain a qualitative understanding of the human impact these expanded support services have. With the commitment of the City Council to ensure adequate funding for mental health services and the passage of the New Deal for CUNY, we can repave potholes, reduce gridlock, and widen lanes that enable more people to have safe and successful journeys down the road of life. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Azania. I will now turn it to Chair Barron for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Briggs. I want to thank the panelists for coming and sharing their testimony with us. And it seems like there's a steady recurring theme which talks about the long wait time, how long it takes to get an appointment. And when those referrals are given, they are not responsive or they're not appropriate given the time, or the provider just not willing for whatever their reason to engage in that. And that's really troubling. To Professor Salas, you've heard CUNY, they've said that they've come down and the ratio is now, I think it's 1 to 1,600 odd students, which is approaching what the international accreditation of counseling services require. So we should be seeing we should make sure that that's in fact happening, which is why I did ask for disaggregation of the numbers of counselors per campus so that we can see, is it equitable? Is it appropriate for the number of students, for the number of students that any particular campus has? So we'll be involved with checking that and seeing that and sharing that with you. And to the CUNY students, be encouraged. You're on a journey that's a beginning or midway of a lot of other things that are going to be open to you. And please keep us informed of how things are going. And we certainly need to look at the issue of not being able to get a referral. That's an appropriate response. And particularly knowing that you have tried for 3 months, I think it was Azania said, three semesters, over a period of 3 semesters, such a limited response, and even having her counselor on site, sitting down with her and validating the experience that she had. So we do thank you for coming and sharing your concerns and raising these issues to us, and we will stay in tune with getting answers to those questions. Thank you. I'll turn it now back to the host.
Thank you, Chair Barron. Our next panel of public testimony in order of speaking will be Gregory Coleman from the Brooklyn College at CUNY and Lisa Nishimura from Young Invincibles. Gregory Coleman, you may now begin your testimony.
Time begins now.
Hi, I'm Greg Coleman. I'm the director of what we call personal counseling at Brooklyn College. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I'm also want to express my gratitude and appreciation to the Vice Chancellor, to the Chancellor, to Ryan Kammeyer, for all of their efforts to improve the resources for mental health at CUNY and at Brooklyn College. I believe that in spite of these efforts that we have a long way to go. I'd like to highlight a couple of things for you. One is that these outside referrals to community services for students are great when the student is motivated and has the resources to take advantage of them. But for most CUNY students, especially the most disadvantaged groups, it's really not a viable option. They're concerned that their family is going to see the explanation of benefits from their insurance provider. They don't have the copay. You heard about the difficulties that I think even a relatively intelligent and articulate student had making these connections. And so that's why, our model at Brooklyn College is we attempt to provide group counseling services on an ongoing basis to every student who needs them. And so far we've been able to do that. It is a challenge educating students that is a first-class service that sometimes is better than individual counseling. I think I don't have much time to highlight a lot of different things, so I'm just going to say that when you're looking at student to counselor ratios, I would urge you to pay attention to a couple of things. I think it's really important to have permanent full-time counselors for continuity of care. If a student comes in on Monday seeking services because they're suicidal, it's not a great idea to have the counselor not available until the following Monday or even in 3 days. There's a role for part-time counselors, but most of the counseling needs to be done by full-time professionals to provide that kind of continuity of care. And especially when you're using a lot of interns and other trainees who need pretty intensive supervision, there's a role for them too, but there has to be a core of stability and professionalism. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll now call on Lisa Nishimura.
Time begins now.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Nishimura, and I'm the engagement coordinator at Young Invincibles. As you know, Young Invincibles is a policy and advocacy nonprofit dedicated to elevating young adults in the political process and expanding economic opportunities for our generation. We work with young adults to ensure that our voices are at the table when it comes to higher education, healthcare, workforce development, and civic engagement. I want to thank the New York City Council, Chairwoman Inez Barron, and the Committee on Higher Education for the opportunity to testify at today's hearing. So today's hearing is for the Committee on Higher Education is held at a crucial time for New York's college students. We have seen how the COVID-19 pandemic has enormously impacted college students' mental health. According to Active Minds, more than 80% of college students reported that COVID-19 had negatively affected their mental health. For CUNY students, more than half reported experiencing anxiety and/or depression, with half stated that they needed mental health support as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, even though half felt they needed mental health support, it does not mean that they actually receive services or quality care given limited capacity. According to a national survey from Inside Higher Ed and College Pulse, after a year into the pandemic, more than 60% of college students nationwide reported having fair or poor mental health, and out of those students, about 60% graded their campus's mental health services a C or lower. This particular statistic is not surprising, as CUNY students have expressed similar sentiments in regards to campus's mental health services, such as waiting time to see a counselor. Some of our advocates at Young Invincible stated there were counselor waitlists with no guarantee. Some students reported that they were told that they would be able to see a campus counselor within 3 to 4 weeks, but ended up ultimately waiting more than 6 months with no updates on when they would be seen. To highlight this issue, about 86% of CUNY students who have anxiety, depression, or serious psychological distress have not visited a campus mental health center within the last 12 months, according to Healthy CUNY. This could be due to various factors such as inaccessibility to these centers, doubt of being able to see a counselor, or even stigma. In addition, students have expressed the lack of diversity of mental health professionals on their campus, vocalizing how they do not feel represented, which can affect a student's ability to connect with their counselor and ultimately continue seeking services. The urgency to resolve the core issues of mental health services expressed by students is even more critical, given this could be a matter of life and death. According to Active Minds, suicide is the second leading cause of death among young adults. Among CUNY students, about 10% ages 18 to 25 had serious thoughts of suicide, while about 6% ages 26 and older had the same thoughts, according to Healthy CUNY. Given the city's commitment to its public higher education system, supporting CUNY must be elevated as a priority so all students who seek services receive them. I'm asking the city to increase investments on campus mental health resources that would help increase capacity, such as investing in peer-to-peer mentoring programs that would supplement services students are receiving. This would be both I'm almost done. This will both increase capacity while also giving students a job. In addition, it would also help build a pipeline to a more diverse pool of counselors. Given the urgency of this matter, I strongly urge the city to help fund hiring more counselors for CUNY to meet the ever-increasing demand of students seeking support. Lastly, I recommend that the city support Senate Bill S844, which requires CUNY and SUNY campuses to have at least a ratio of 1 mental health professional to 1,000 students. I urge the Committee on Higher Education to consider the concerns and solutions of other students and student-led organizations speaking today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Lisa. I will now turn it to Chair Barron for any questions.
Thank you. I want to thank this panel for coming and sharing their testimony. And I'm glad to see that the CUNY administration is still on the line to hear directly from you what your concerns are. And Dr. Coleman, you talked about group counseling, which is something that I had thought of previously, but didn't bring up in this session. And it would be interesting to know how popular is your group counseling sessions? What's the percentage of students who are in group counseling as opposed to those who are in one-to-one counseling? And what's been the response of students to group counseling? I can see that there's an advantage to peers sitting down and talking about similar kinds of issues. But I also think there might be something that has a greater need than what would be talked about in a group counseling. So how popular is the group session? How many students are generally there? How often do they meet? And how does that compare to individual one-to-one? Professor Coleman, can you answer that? Oh, okay. Well, if you can find that information out and send that to us, we would be glad to.
I was muted.
Okay.
And not able to unmute myself. That,
okay.
You know, the host has control of that, which is appropriate. And I can say, I don't have exact figures for you, but maybe a quarter of students or a third of students are motivated to take advantage of, you know, the kind of unlimited group counseling frame. And it's not suitable for all students if they have trauma or they have a high level of risk. We want to follow them individually, but having the group counseling option allows us to direct our resources to, you know, the higher clinical priorities. And with respect to group counseling, you know, it's really interesting how students can watch students who have more experience in counseling can learn, the less experienced students can learn from the more experienced students how to use counseling, how to participate in it so that they get the maximum value from counseling. So it really, in some ways, for the most students, it's a more valuable experience than individual counseling, and it's a kind of counterintuitive thing, but it is supported by research in the field.
Thank you. And to Ms. Nishimura, we thank you again for your comments and highlighting the need for a population that reflects the diversity of students to be involved in providing services. And again, we hear about the long delay in getting a response, the wait time, the wait list. And that seems to be a recurring theme that we're hearing. So as I said, Dr. Maybank is here and she's taking notes copiously. So I'm sure that as the program goes forward, she will include that. And Dr. Maybank, if the host could unmute you, I just wanted to ask, what is the forms of counseling that are presented? And if you could, in your responses to us, as we've posed earlier questions, indicate how many campuses are utilizing group counseling for meeting the mental health needs of students, and how effective either the counselors or the students have indicated that has been for them. So if you could find that information and share that with us, we would appreciate that as well.
Most definitely. And I just want to echo Dr. Coleman's characterization. Group as a therapeutic intervention matters. And I've seen it work. I've seen it work in so many ways for so many young people over the course of my career that I definitely hope that we will take a look at that. And, you know, even if you have a wait list group, it matters. Things come to a head and can be addressed in that context as well. So definitely we'll look at that, get it.
Good. Okay.
Oh, Chair Barron, apologies, you're unmuted. You're muted.
Thank you. I just wanted to pose another question to Dr. Maybanks. And it gets back to an earlier topic that I raised with you regarding part-time and full-time. I'm not familiar with all of the intricacies of that, but I think I've been getting little notes here that it may be that a part-time counselor may work as few as 5 hours per week. And so as you break down that information for me as to the number of part-time and the number of full-time, if you would further disaggregate it so that I'll know of the part-time people, how many hours or days or whatever they're working. And the other question is, does the ratio, I don't have information about the International Accrediting Counseling Services, but do they have different standards for different titles? Or is it blanket that they have one counselor per 1,500 students, which is tremendous.
There is a rather lengthy document that provides standards associated with counseling services. And so the thing that most universities are looking for, campuses are looking for, is that ratio. You know, that's the thing that most people go to. So it's set as a standard, and they have a statement that says, you know, that the advice is 1,000 to 1,500. And so it depends on the nature of the campus, it depends on the setting, it depends on the market in which you sit as well. And so they've kind of set that as the overall standard, but they talk about different types of clinicians in the documents that they produce and in the different ways that the services can be structured and may offer different ways of engaging students. So I can get you a link so that you can kind of explore their website.
Okay, thank you. And I have a note that Dr. Coleman has raised his hand. I don't know if that was from before or if that's for now. So if it's for now, you can, the host can unmute you, you can pose whatever the comment is.
Hi, thank you very much for recognizing me. I would like to urge that when we look at student to counselor ratios, that we be careful that we're looking at not at FTE students, because you can't counsel a quarter of a student or a half of a student. So I would like to urge that we look at the ratio of counselors to actual enrolled student persons, not FTE according to the number of credits for which they are enrolled.
Oh, interesting. That makes sense. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Coleman. And I will now turn it back to our host, Amy Briggs, to take us further. Thank you to the panel.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, seeing no other council members waiting to ask questions, we have now heard from everyone that has signed up to testify, and we appreciate your time and presence. If we have inadvertently missed anyone that would like to testify, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and I will call on you in the order of your hands being raised. Seeing no one else, I would like to note that written testimony, which shall be reviewed in full by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Chair Barron, we have concluded public testimony for this hearing.
Thank you. Seeing that there's no further business before this body, we are now adjourned.